Welcome back to Life's Cholent. My name is Avital, and today we have a very special guest with us, Cantor Mordechai Aryeh Levin, who is the Cantor or the Chazan at the Elwood Shule in Melbourne, Australia. The topic of today's discussion is what it means to be a Cantor or a Chazan, how that position originated and how it has evolved throughout the centuries, and we also delve into the role of Chazan in modern-day Jewish communities. The insights that Mordechai shares with us are not only relevant for those who are interested in becoming a Chazan, but truly for everyone. One of the lessons that he emphasizes is that God has given each and every one of us our own talents, our own skills, our own abilities, and that we cannot ignore them. He suggests that we almost have a commandment to pursue those talents, those gifts that God has given us, not to let them go to waste or be for naught. And so there's really something in today's video for everyone. Mordechai also shares a beautiful segment from his Kol Nidre service at the Great Synagogue in Sydney, and we also get to learn about one of his other talents, which are his amazing paintings that he creates. So without further ado, here's my interview with Cantor Mordechai Aryeh Levin. Welcome back to Life's Cholent. My name is Avital, and today we have a very special guest all the way from Melbourne, Australia. Today we have Cantor Mordechai Aryeh Levin, who is the Cantor at the Elwood Shule in Melbourne, Australia. Cantor Levin, Mordechai, thank you so much for being here. So the first thing I would like to address before we even get started is what is a Cantor? In Hebrew, the word is Chazan. Tell me a little bit about what that is.
Well, a Chazan, the distinction between a sitar and a Chazan is essentially in relation to the type of music and I guess the voice in of itself. Chazan is more musical. It's more there's a greater emphasis on the voice and the way it can project, the way it can make people feel through the melody and the prayers. It's all done to reach the same goal, which is to awaken the soul of the Jew in the congregation, and it's to obviously bring a great energy to the services, which is brought about through the melodies. And so a shaliach tzipor is someone that merely leads the services, literally, and the chazan does the same. But the added benefit, I suppose, to a chazan is a melodic voice, and there's also a bit of training that's involved in becoming a chazan as well, in terms of the liturgical music that is used and that's been passed down through generations of composers, and not even just composers in the normal sense, in the conventional sense of the Kosovitsky, Oisher, and all these chazanim in the last century, and so on. But we're talking about ancient melodies that have been passed down through generations before them. So it really comes down to that. Yeah.
That's a beautiful explanation, and we're going to dive into that a little bit more. But before we do that, I'd love to hear a little bit about why you decided to become a chazan, what that process looked like in terms of what you had to study, the steps you had to go through, how you ended up where you are now.
So I believe that there's not just one way to become a chazan. I believe there are multiple streams, and it really depends on the person, on the individual, as to how he wants to navigate this journey, should he want to become a chazan. My personal journey started, I would say, at a very interesting time in my life where I used to sing, but it wasn't serious, and I didn't give it much thought. When I went to Israel, my aunt, Alea Shalom, Miriam, she saw that I had gifts of the sort. She said to my mother, he is an artist, not only in the sense of fine art, but in the sense of his voice. So you have the responsibility, she was saying to my mother, to take him and to nurture his gifts. And we didn't really know where to start. there wasn't exactly a Chazan, a Chazanot school in Melbourne, Australia, and so there may have been some teachers and private tuitions, but I'm not sure. That's just not where I ended up. I ended up singing at a Shabbos meal, and then I was approached by someone at the Shabbos meal saying that, look, you've got a really good raw talent. I would like to introduce you to someone to nurture that and to obviously build on that. And that's when I met my first singing teacher, Giuseppe Talia, who was Italian. And he was the artistic director at the time of Melbourne City Opera. And at the time I believe I was 15. But the real shift from just normal singing and, dare I say, operatic singing into the world of Chazanut really came into its own. It came into development only after my father passed away. And that was when I was 16 years old. And it was a very, very, as is obviously normal, it was a very difficult time. And for me, music is life. It gives purpose. There's so many things I could say about music and how it can impact someone emotionally. But I was grieving. And as you know, in the Jewish tradition, during a year of grievance over losing a father or mother, or both, lo aleinu, we're not allowed to, one of the rules is we're not allowed to listen to music. But I sought counsel from the rabbis and obviously stating my case as to how this can work out. And not to mention that at the time anyway, not that I was aware at the time, but because I was studying and because it was for the purpose of study, that was already enough of a reason to essentially be okay with listening to music, but I wanted to make sure. And at the time, I was still very uncertain about the prayers and what I was really doing and the nusach and so on and so forth, because I was praying 3 times a day to elevate, obviously, my father's soul in Shemayim, in the heavens, and that's what's expected of the generation after our parents and so on and so forth, that once they leave this world, it's incumbent on us to pray on their behalf. And that is when the Chazanut journey really began. I started learning different nuschaot, being from both a Sephardi background and an Ashkenazi background. My father was Ashkenazi, my mother was Sephardi. I was exposed to a varied environment music-wise, and I think that influenced a lot of my early singing. But now, given that I've been more involved in the Ashkenazi congregations, I suppose that's really taken the forefront of my singing, I would say. And essentially through the tragedy came the realization of this journey. And it really gave me a sense of purpose and a sense of drive. And as a Chazan, as someone who essentially is the spokesperson of the congregation in front of God, I felt that because of the pain and because of the sincerity in my prayer, and obviously it doesn't hurt to have a nice melodic voice as well, but I'd like to put the emphasis first and foremost on the emphasis and the intentions of one's thoughts when praying. I think that through these thoughts and intentions that the music really shines and really reaches the people. As it says, so the things that that come from the heart enter the heart.
Sounds very beautifully said. It seems like your aunt had a wonderful intuition, and as you expressed so nicely, the passing of your father really brought life. Like you said, music is life. It really brought life to something beautiful in your life. Going back a little bit, when we look at the history of the position of a chazan, my understanding is that it emerged after the destruction of the Second Temple, because the Jewish people didn't really know their way through the prayer service, and so the chazan would be up there and he would lead them. As you said, I think the position has evolved, as you were sort of saying, how you really put emotion and soul into it, and it's very moving, especially with the voice you have. It can really be something that moves people and brings people together. But how do you see, as you have more experience, how do you see that the position of a chazan has evolved from the time right after the destruction of the temple, where the chazan really needed to bring the people along, to modern times now?
As you said so well, it really came down to initially being a shaliach tzibur. That was the real intention of a chazan. And so the term chazan didn't really come about till much, much later, where, active musical aspects were added into the services to enliven the service, to make people more connected to the service through tunes and through melody. It says in Hasidic teachings and so on, and Kabbalistic teachings, that Shar HaNegina, the gates of music and melody, are right next to Shar HaTshuva, which is the gates of repentance. So the music is the vehicle, the melody is a vehicle to the outcome we want, which is ultimately achieving that sense of repentance, and that we have made amends with the struggles and the challenges of the human condition. And I suppose that's really the main progression, I suppose. And obviously it was influenced by where we were at the time. So if you would look at a Spanish Portuguese synagogue, they will have a very different vibe, a very different nusach, and very different tunes than that of a Eastern European synagogue. And if you were going to go to just a full-on Sephardi synagogue, you can just walk into any synagogue essentially in Israel and you will find a Sephardi synagogue. You'll find again different ways of achieving the same thing essentially. It comes down obviously because back in the temple days we were all one aguda, we were all together, we all followed the same tradition. Since we were expelled after the destruction of the Second Temple and we were dispersed amongst the nations, we had to find our path back. And even if we diverted from what was the original path, as long as we get a semblance of what was, it is as if we are carrying out the services of the temple, as were.
That's really well said. I like that. I was going to ask you, since you mentioned that it was your father who was Ashkenazi and your mother is Sephardi, is that correct? So you grew up with some of the difference in tunes, and I recognize that you were probably familiar with both of them. How do they differ? I mean, I know in congregations that are not Orthodox, obviously there usually are instruments, and so maybe some of the instrumentation is different. But in the melodies themselves, do you see a big distinction between Ashkenazi tunes and Sephardi tunes?
I do, and I also find a huge difference, obviously, with the voice types that are used in both. Sephardi leans towards somewhat of a nasal approach, which is taken culturally from where they lived, being in mostly Islamic states, and how things were done over there, the culture of the society influenced the type of music that the Jews produced in the service of Hashem. Because in the end of the day, it is the intention of what the music is meant for that dictates whether it is fit to be included in services and in the service of God. So it comes down to the intention of the composer. Even if it was influenced by something that wasn't initially Jewish, the reinterpretation that had the intention to uplift Jewish individuals essentially gave new life to a previously ungodly music type. But I think there is a huge distinction between the two. Maybe not huge, maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but I think there definitely is a distinct difference between the two. And it's very easy to know based on the pronunciations and even the range and the types of ranges and how we achieve those notes and the way we say the words, and it's so many different aspects of the davening that are tailored towards the audience and towards the congregation. I think because of obviously the diaspora and all that kind of story, that whole narrative of the Jewish people, I think it was forced upon us to get creative. And that's how we got with all these different nuschaot. We had to get creative. We had to find God in every place that we were. And Chazanut, I think, is a testament to that. We found God in every kind of music. And in Chazanut, we obviously went into Puritan, and it went on as it progressed today, where you find very modern Jewish music. It still relates to godliness, but it's reinterpreted with the intention of godliness, so it is holy.
That's a very nice way of putting it. When you go to a Jewish wedding, which is not where you have a chazan, but I think you're right. The Jewish music is sort of infused with that spirit of holiness and of celebration, and that's a very nice way of looking at it. Have you ever tried to compose something of your own?
I have. It's not out there yet, but I have done a bit of brainstorming with individuals, and I think that the music flows through me. I'm the conduit.
Okay.
Well,
one day.
Yeah, and I feel that's the best way to tell that you're meant to do. It's like you can't stop it from happening. You hum to yourself a tune, and then suddenly you build on that tune, and it becomes an obsession of the soul. It becomes your life. It is your life. Music is your life. Creativity is your life.
It's a passion, certainly. I know in the Shulchan Aruch, which translates, I think, to the Code of Jewish Law, or that maybe that's more of the explanation, it says something about how the Shaliach Tzibur, which is the messenger of the community in terms of prayer, how that person needs to be sort of a high moral caliber, because if that person's going to be leading the services, then it needs to be somebody who has sort of righteousness and good intentions. I see you smiling. How has that impacted your life, if it has? Does it make you feel the need to live at a higher standard, or do you think that that's more like an old idea?
Very loaded question.
You can choose not to answer it if you prefer.
I would love to answer, but it's a very question. It warrants a lot of discussion and debate.
Okay.
through the initial years, and the exceptions obviously, the highest individuals. Um, I find that as we progress through the generations, we're further and further away from what it is to be in the temple. The demands of leading services and the requirements of someone leading services has ultimately changed. The fundamentals have not necessarily, but even then, it is at the discretion of the rabbi and the congregation to see whether that shaliach tzibur is worthy of that position. And that's what makes it quite difficult at times for a lot of individuals that obviously have the voice and have the passion and drive. And obviously when the music takes over, it's pure, or you'd hope so. But usually it comes from a place where it transcends you'd hope it transcends the idea of I'm doing this, rather it's coming through me. I'm just a vehicle to create this. And God has obviously provided this gift. I think over the years, we've had to minimalize the expansive rulings regarding a shaliach tzibur / Chazan. And obviously that's a great loss in a way, because it's not the ideal. But at the end of the day, from a personal view on it all, a Chazan should uphold the Kol, Shmirat Shabbat, for example. And this will be dictated in the contract of a Chazan going into a congregation. The rabbi will set out the rules. And is it up for negotiation? In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. And it depends what is up for negotiation. I think that there should be more inclusivity in regards to being a Chazan. Because I feel that, but I also feel that there needs to be a type of hashkafa, there needs to be a type of process of how to approach the pulpit. There needs to be an ideology in place where it's important to emphasize that yes, you have a beautiful voice. Yes, it's amazing, you're a performer. But first and foremost, you have to acknowledge that you're doing this to represent the people, and you're doing this to obviously inspire the people. And you have to have these intentions in mind. I make a huge effort to have these intentions in mind. And yes, you're focusing on a lot of things. You're focusing on the music, you're focusing on being perfect. But I would say, maybe chill out in terms of getting it perfect musically, and put that, that bit of, sacrifice a bit of the perfection music-wise and insert that energy into how it meshes with the people and how you understand what you're saying and what you're singing, and really put an emphasis on intention. Because it really takes both of those to create the ultimate Chazan. In my personal opinion, it's a combination of merits, intention, as well as the voice and musical understanding. And I think, in a nutshell of a sort, I think that's really what it comes down to, and how it's kind of progressed over time, how it was initially. That's why a lot of rabbis in many congregations lead services. They don't have a chazan.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for answering that question. I can see why it's a complex question, but certainly an interesting one, especially as Judaism has evolved and there are so many different sects of Judaism and different groups and ways of practicing. So I thought that was a very good answer. Thank you. So moving on to something a little bit more fun, I imagine. So I think that while in some congregations a chazan is utilized every week, like a sort of a formal position of a chazan, in many it's really something that is focused around the high holidays. So the first is why the high holidays, and the second is how do you prepare? You just did a wonderful service for the high holidays it was a synagogue in Sydney, but I'm blanking on the name.
The Great Synagogue.
Synagogue in Sydney. So how do you prepare for a performance like that? And again, why the high holidays?
Why the high holidays? Well, as we know, the high holidays are the pinnacle of the Jewish year. They are the holidays of, as I say, anticipation and climax. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, I would say, are the main attractions to both religious and non-religious Jews, because that is the time when it is ingrained and indoctrinated, I suppose, that this is the time that if you messed up, or even if you didn't mess up, but in any case, if you didn't show up to shul, if you did show up to shul the whole year, all these things that come into your head as to what may or may have not gone wrong throughout the year in terms of your service, your identity, and all these things. This is the time that we are told that none of that matters as long as you're present and that you are willing to change. If you have the intention to change and to become better, we are taught from a very young age, from kindergarten, if you're growing up in a Jewish environment, and even from home, that this is the time to invest in your faith. And that's why you get a lot of non-religious Jews that don't necessarily show up anytime, unless it's a bar mitzvah, wedding, or ceremony or something, but they definitely do show up for these times. Or at least have the intention to show up for these times. And I think that speaks volumes in terms of how we, over the years, have set the standard of what these services represent. And they represent a year worth of uncertainty. I'd like to put it down to that. It's a year's worth of uncertainty, and suddenly, at the end of Yom Kippur, Ne'ilah, the gates are essentially closing, are becoming locked. It's like that final opportunity to rush in with all our last prayers and intentions. And then there's this haste that we're in haste, we're hurrying to reach this pinnacle, this race against something, essentially.
Time, perhaps.
Time, space, all of that. This idea of spiritual confusion and spiritual turmoil, where nothing is certain, nothing is clear. Who is here? Who will live? Mi yamut. All these ideas are coming into an amalgamation at the time of Ne'ilah and the expression of the high holiday services. Because of this overwhelming sense of spirituality and how spiritual can affect the physical, manifest in the real, physical world, it just makes people edgy. It makes people edgy, they need to feel safe. How do people feel safe if not through their own understanding? And how do we bring about that connection with God if not through Shtar HaNegina, which directly correlates with Shtar HaTshuvah? And I think that's why there's such a huge emphasis on the high holidays. Because that's it. That's another year. The uncertainty has passed. We've come to the climax, come to this concrete conclusion after Ne'ilah. We've had Rosh Hashanah, we have Aseret Yomei Teshuvah, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And then comes Yom Kippur, we're praying for the finalized documentation up in heaven of our way forward in life. There's a clear correlation between upper realms and what we're doing down here. And because we are ingrained with this idea that the spiritual and the non-physical aspects of our faith have the ability to influence the physical, once it involves the physical, we are already changed. That's when we start getting scared. That's when we start saying, well, even if there is an iota of a chance that this is real, I want to be covered. I want to be sure that I'm doing the right thing, that I'm present, and that God understands that even though in some cases I may or may not be religious most of the time, I may or may not uphold the highest moral code, but at this point in time, I'm ready to make the change. I'm scared. I'm fragile. I'm vulnerable in front of God, and I hope God sees. And that's how God is. God is a merciful God, and that's why year in, year out, we're given the opportunity. And obviously, through the use of the Chazan, we're given this amazing opportunity to become inspired in order to bring the new year.
Very beautiful response, and something you kind of alluded to earlier reminds me just music does have quite this power, this transcending power to move people to pray more deeply, to give them peace at the end of the service that they've done what they can. It is very calming, it's very moving, and so I can see why it would be an integral part of the holiest days of the year. Do you have any sense as to why it is that the Orthodox congregations, that there are fewer Orthodox congregations who employ a full-time Chazan than non-Orthodox?
I suppose there's a heavy reliability on the Chazan in the non-Orthodox congregation because aside from the clergy outside of the Chazan really make services, I would suppose, enjoyable, palatable, and entertaining. I suppose that's, in a way, the same case in Orthodox situations. However, in Orthodox situations, usually the congregants are perhaps a bit more learned, and they require a bit more than just a nice they require the assistance of rabbi and have real halachic rules. I personally feel that would make sense as to why that is the case. I haven't spoken enough to non-Orthodox congregations, so I can't really wholeheartedly understand why they would need a full-time chazan. But it also happens to be that in many Orthodox congregations that there are full-time chazans /
right.
So they have other duties outside of being a chazan. However, the fundamental role that they fill is that of being. So it really comes down to that, and sometimes in a non-Orthodox congregation, the chazan could also be the musical director. He could have multiple other side roles. So I suppose it really depends on the congregation and their contract.
On a slightly different note, I saw a recent interview you did with the Shtick where you were talking about your artwork. I'd love to hear. You're doing this amazing Jewish artwork, and I'll definitely leave your information in the description on this video so that people can see it. But I'd love to hear a little bit about your artwork and any other endeavors you have.
My artwork, as I said earlier on, my aunt really told the people of my aunt. I'm still obviously learning, never really stopped learning in artwork. And I have to say that the amount of inspiration that I get from Jewish artists, I would have to say Jewish artists, for example, Mark Chazan, Nakamura, these are names that I could say many other, Modigliani and all these different artists. I'm just so inspired by, and I totally see how their influence has penetrated my work and become part of my complex identity. And I would say that it is a lifetime development, and it is especially whenever I was in lockdown during time, I've been in lockdown already. One first time I was coming back from overseas, my brief overseas travel, and the second time when I was in Sydney, quarantined for isolate for 2 weeks. The both times, I lost sense of time, and my sole duty was to create. And during this time, I would call limbo. I would call this my limbo period. It was a period of work because of all the uncertainty that was going around. I felt that I had no refuge rather my art. And that's when the creative juices started coming out. I was able to complete so much and achieve so much in that period of time. I created a 12-part series of the 12 series of Jewish holidays. I actually eventually went to get into the calendar because I really, they are so beautiful. They're just so meticulous, so much work and detail and feeling in my work that I think it warrants a bit of appreciation. I was always told that we have a gift Hashem has provided, and it's always important to acknowledge that Hashem provided the gift. It's always important that you are merely a vessel that carries water. The water being the gift. If Hashem provides, you have to sanctify His name in a way that is good. Whether that be music, art, otherwise. So the lines kind of blur in terms of I want publicity, but it's not for me. So that I can, and maybe as part of the human condition, maybe it is for me. Let's say it is, but I always am aware of the fact that Hashem is provided, and I think it's a beautiful, and it's a real driving force in terms of being successful in this period. Definitely.
I just want to say I don't think that they are mutually exclusive in the sense of I think that Hashem provides the gift that you have, and that He knows the human reaction is that it feels good to be able to share your work and have recognition for it. But that's the human reaction. But it's only because Hashem wants your work to be shared. That's at least my. Hashem wants the gift to be shared with other people. That's why He gave it to you. He didn't give it to you to have it and to hold it for yourself. He gave it to you. And so it's nice for you. And
Sorry?
I said it's nice for you and for everyone else.
My aunt told my mother in relation to that exact thought. Hashem provides, You must, because it's a commandment to share it with the world. Otherwise, you're being selfish.
Oh, yeah. I like that. I hadn't heard that exact interpretation, but I like that. Very nice idea. Anything else that you would like to add about being a Chazan, about your artwork, any other topic that you feel compelled to share?
I think we covered a great deal of thought, but I look forward to answering any questions if you have any further questions. But yeah, it comes down to if you have the gift and destiny, you see that there is a potential. It doesn't have to be a full-time gig, but just know that if you need to share the gift with the world, ensure that it is with an intention, and that it is with the hope that the gift will bring about positive things, whether that be in the general sense or within the individual. That's what it's really, especially music wise, that's what it's really. Thinking about the positive things. I want to acknowledge their ability to do better.
Very well said. Thank you so much for being here with us today and for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom. And for everybody who's watching, stay tuned to hear the beautiful Kol Nidre service that you did after this video. I will leave your information for your art and your music in the description below so people can find you, follow you, and I look forward to continuing in this project exploring Jewish prayer and to hearing the music that you create in the future. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Kol Nidre Vesarei V'chormei V'konamei V'chinuyei V'kinusei Shvikid, בטלין ומבוטלין. לא שרירין ולא קיומן. Lo